The great chamber of Concordia Prime stretched out like a metal cathedral in space. Thousands of delegates from hundreds of worlds sat in their designated sections, watching the center platform where Ambassador Jiho Kim stood alone. His dark suit looked plain compared to the glittering forms around him. Some aliens floated in containment fields, others towered on mechanical legs, and some existed as clouds of light. They all stared at him with eyes, sensors, or whatever they used to see. Jiho had prepared his speech for weeks. Earth depended on him today. Humanity depended on him. But as he looked at the cold faces around him, he felt his hope fading like a dying star. The chief counselor, a Velthera named Crystallix, spoke with a voice that hummed like crystal bells. Ambassador Kim, your species stands accused of technological theft, unauthorized expansion, and posing a danger to galactic stability. What defense do you offer? Jiho took a deep breath. Honored counselors, we took nothing that was not freely shared. We expanded to empty worlds that harmed no one, and we are no danger to anyone. We are simply young and eager to learn. A Kolari representative speaking through 1,000 voices at once interrupted him. Young, eager? You advanced faster in 30 years than most species do in 3,000. You demand access to restricted technologies. You multiply across worlds like a virus. Your very existence threatens the balance we have maintained for eons. Captain Hyaron Park watched the proceedings from Earth's flagship, the Horizon, docked at the station. She sat in her command chair, her jaw tight as she listened. Around her, the bridge crew worked in tense silence. They all knew this trial was just a formality. The decision had already been made. Captain, her first officer said quietly, I'm detecting increased energy signatures around the station. They're powering up the quantum barriers. Hyaron nodded slowly. They're not even waiting for the verdict. Get me Prime Minister Choi. Back on Earth, in a government building in Seoul, Prime Minister Daeho Choi sat at his desk watching the same broadcast. His weathered face showed no emotion, but his hands gripped the armrests of his chair tightly. He had fought wars, survived political battles, and led humanity through first contact with aliens. But this moment felt like defeat. When his screen lit up with Captain Park's face, he knew what she would say before she spoke. Sir, they're activating containment protocols. We need to start evacuation procedures now. Daeho closed his eyes for a moment. Do it, get our people out of council space. All of them. In the council chamber, Jiho was still speaking. His voice had grown passionate now, almost desperate. We have done nothing wrong, nothing. We simply wanted to be part of this galactic community. We wanted to learn, to trade, to make friends among the stars. Is that a crime? Is enthusiasm for knowledge and progress something to be punished? A Nemeron counselor, a being of flowing energy, spoke with a voice like wind through trees. Young human, your species does not understand? The galaxy is old. We have seen civilizations rise and fall. We have watched as aggressive species spread like fire, consuming everything in their path. Your people have the capacity for both great good and terrible destruction. We cannot risk which path you will choose. So you will judge us before we have done anything wrong? Jiho's voice cracked. You will punish us for crimes we have not committed, for a future that may never happen. Crystallix's form shifted colors from blue to deep purple. The vote has been cast. By unanimous decision of the elder races, humanity is hereby banished from all territories under Galactic Council jurisdiction. You have 30 standard days to evacuate all human presence from our space. After that, quantum barriers will seal the border. Any humans found within will be considered invaders and dealt with accordingly. The chamber erupted in noise. Some species cheered, others remained silent, and a few voices called out in protest. But the decision was final. Jiho stood frozen on the platform. 30 years of diplomacy ended in 30 seconds of judgment. He had failed. Humanity had failed. Captain Hyaron immediately began coordinating the evacuation. Human colonies on 17 worlds started packing up. Research stations were abandoned. Trading posts were closed. Families that had made homes on alien worlds had to leave everything behind. Ships of all sizes began the long journey back toward Earth and out toward the edge of the galaxy. Prime Minister Daeho addressed humanity that night. His image was broadcast to every human settlement, every ship, every screen where humans could see. They have cast us out, he said, his voice steady despite everything. They fear what we might become. Perhaps they are right to fear us. Not because we will be the monsters they imagine, but because we will prove them wrong. We will survive this. We will thrive in the darkness they send us to, and one day we will return, not as beggars seeking permission, but as equals demanding respect. The quantum barriers activated exactly 30 days later. Massive walls of energy sealed off the entire galactic border, creating an impassable barrier between humanity and the rest of the galaxy. The last human ships passed through just hours before, carrying the last refugees from Council space. Jiho Kim stood on the observation deck of a transport ship, watching the galaxy shrink behind them. Somewhere in that sea of stars was Concordia Prime, where his career and dreams had died. He pressed his hand against the cold window. "We'll be back," he whispered to the distant lights. "I promise you we'll be back." The ship turned toward the darkness between galaxies, following the trail of humanity's exodus into the void. 200 years passed in the darkness between galaxies. The stars were distant points of light here, so far away they seemed like dreams. Humanity floated in the void aboard massive habitat stations and settled on rogue planets that drifted through the emptiness. These were the dark centuries, and they changed humanity forever. Dr. So-Min Lee worked in a laboratory built inside a hollowed-out asteroid. The metal walls were cold and the lights flickered sometimes when power ran low. She had been born on Earth but had spent most of her life out here in the dark. Now she was old, her hair gray, her hands marked with scars from decades of work, but her eyes still burned with determination. "The problem," she explained to her younger assistants, "is that we need resources, but there's nothing out here. No planets to mine, no suns to harvest energy from, just darkness and empty space." One of her assistants, a young man named Taewon Jang, looked at the equations on the screen. He had never seen Earth. He had been born on Station Unity, one of the larger human settlements. People called his generation the Voidborn, those who knew only the darkness. "What about dark matter?" Taewon asked. "The void isn't really empty. It's full of things we just can't see." Someone smiled. This was why she loved the Voidborn. They thought differently. They weren't trying to recreate what humanity had lost. They were trying to build something new. "Show me your calculations," she said. 5 years later, they activated the first Void Forge. It was a massive machine that harvested dark matter and converted it into usable materials. The process was complex and dangerous, but it worked. Suddenly, humanity could build things in the void. They could create metals, plastics, and even food from the nothing around them. Admiral Min Ho-yoon stood on the bridge of the warship Resolution, watching the first Void Forge come online. He was the military commander of what humans now called the Terran Coalition. It wasn't really a government, just a loose alliance of colonies and stations that helped each other survive. "This changes everything," he said to his staff. "With these forges, we can build a real fleet. We can establish permanent settlements." His tactical officer, a void-born woman named Yoonji, nodded. "We can do more than survive, sir. We can grow." But growth came with pain. Not all colonies survived. Station Hope lost containment in year 53 of the exile. 3,000 people died in minutes. Colony New Beijing on a rogue planet couldn't produce enough food. Half the population starved before supply ships arrived. The mining settlement at Dark Rock 1 was destroyed when their reactor failed. Every disaster taught humanity something new. Every failure made them stronger. They learned to build better reactors, create more efficient life support, and develop food that could grow in almost no light. They modified their own genetics, making humans who could survive in lower oxygen, resist more radiation, and see better in the dark. Taewon Jang eventually became the leader of the Voidborn Council. Representing those who had never known anything but exile, he sat in meetings with the old Earthborn leaders, arguing for new approaches to old problems. "We can't keep thinking like we're waiting to go home," he said at one meeting. "This void is our home now. We need to own it, master it, make it ours." Some of the older humans disagreed. They still dreamed of returning to the galaxy, of green worlds and bright stars. But the Voidborn had different dreams. They dreamed of cities in the dark, of civilizations that didn't need planets at all. The technology developed during these years was revolutionary. The quantum drives that could push ships through space without traditional fuel. The matter resequencers that could take any material and turn it into something else. The dark energy collectors that pulled power from the fabric of space itself. None of this technology existed in the galaxy they had been banished from. So-Min Lee, now ancient and near death, sat in her laboratory one final time. She looked at her life's work, at the machines and formulas that had kept humanity alive. "They thought they were punishing us," she said to Taewon, who had become like a son to her. They thought the darkness would kill us or break us, but all they did was force us to evolve. She died 3 days later, but her work continued. Every station, every colony, every ship bore the mark of her genius. Admiral Min Ho Yoon had grown old too, but he still commanded the fleet. It was much larger now. Hundreds of warships built in the void forges. They were different from the ships humanity had used before the exile. They were faster, stronger, and powered by technologies the Galactic Council had never imagined. He called a meeting of all the colony leaders, the Voidborn Council, and the military commanders. The holographic conference showed faces from across the dark expanse humanity now called home. "We've been out here for 2 centuries, Minho said. 200 years of struggle and survival. But we've done more than survive. We've built something new. The question now is, what do we do with it?" The debate lasted for months. Some wanted to stay in the void, building their civilization away from the galaxy that had rejected them. Others wanted to return, to reclaim their place among the stars. The Voidborn were split, some curious about the galaxy their ancestors had come from, others seeing it as irrelevant to their lives. Finally, they reached a decision. They would send scouts to probe the quantum barriers to see what had changed in the galaxy during their absence. If the barriers could be crossed, they would assess whether returning was worth the risk. Taiwan Jiang volunteered to lead the first scouting mission. He was 50 years old now, considered young among the leadership but experienced enough to be trusted. His ship, the Shadow's Edge, was built specifically for stealth and reconnaissance. "Remember," Admiral Minho told him before he left, "you're not invading. You're just looking. Find out what's happened in the galaxy. Find out if they've changed. Find out if we should even care about going back." Taiwan nodded. "And if the barriers can't be crossed?" Minho smiled grimly. "Then we keep building here. We have everything we need in the void. The galaxy is just stars and planets. We've learned to live without those." The Shadow's Edge departed from the main fleet, heading toward the distant glow of the galaxy. Behind it, human civilization continued in the darkness. Void forges built new stations. Families raised children who had never seen a natural sun. Scientists pushed the boundaries of what was possible. Soldiers trained for battles that might never come. Humanity had been banished to die. Instead, they had transformed into something the galaxy had never seen before. They had become people of the void, masters of the darkness, survivors of the impossible. The dark centuries were ending. What came next would determine whether humanity returned as friends or as something else entirely. Commander Jiwoo An stood on the bridge of the Shadow's Edge as they approached the quantum barrier. The massive wall of energy stretched across space like a curtain of light, blocking access to the galaxy beyond. It had stood for 200 years, keeping humanity locked in the darkness. Now Jiwoo was here to find a way through. "Reading the barrier structure," said her science officer, a voidborn named Yoonji Nam. "It's degraded significantly. The council probably hasn't maintained it properly. There are weak points everywhere." Jiwoo leaned forward in her chair. She was third-generation voidborn. Her grandparents born on Earth, but her parents and herself raised in the dark. She had studied the old records about the galaxy, but it was an alien place to her. The void was home. Everything else was just theory. "Can we slip through without them detecting us?" she asked. Yoonji's fingers danced across her console. "Yes, Commander. The barrier was built to stop ships using old human technology, but our quantum drives operate on different principles. To the barrier sensors will look like background radiation." They passed through the barrier 3 hours later. Jiwoo felt nothing, but the screen showed they were now inside galactic space. Stars suddenly seemed brighter, closer. There were planets here, thousands of them, teeming with life. After a lifetime in the void, it felt strange and overwhelming. "Take us to the nearest inhabited system," Jiwoo ordered. "Stay cloaked. I want to observe before we make contact." The system they entered was called Helios Trade Station according to the old star charts. It had been a minor trading post 200 years ago. Now, as Shadow's Edge crept closer, they saw it had become a major hub. Hundreds of ships came and went, carrying goods between worlds. But something was wrong. Yoonji noticed it first. "Commander, look at these ships. They're using the same technology as 2 centuries ago, maybe even older." "There's been no advancement at all." Jiwoo studied the scans. Yoonji was right. The ships moved slowly, their engines inefficient. Their weapons were primitive. Their communications used old quantum protocols that Shadow's Edge could easily intercept and decode. They spent 3 weeks observing different systems. Everywhere they looked, they saw the same thing: The galaxy had stagnated. Technology hadn't advanced. In some places, it had actually gotten worse. Yunji compiled her findings into a report. Commander, I think I understand what happened. The Galactic Council controlled all technological development. They decided what species could learn and when. But with humanity gone, there was no competition, no pressure to innovate. They just maintained what they had. What about the Council itself? Jiwoo asked. They traveled to Concordia Prime next, the heart of Council power. The station looked magnificent from a distance, a massive structure that had stood for thousands of years. But as they got closer, they saw the cracks. Parts of the station were dark, no longer powered. Some sections had been sealed off. Ships docked at only half the available ports. The broadcast they intercepted told the full story. The elder races were dying. The Velthara's crystalline bodies were degrading, and they couldn't reproduce fast enough. The Kolari hive mind was fragmenting, splitting into smaller groups that fought each other. The Namarans were withdrawing from physical reality, becoming more energy and less substance. The younger species that the Council ruled over were restless. Pirates raided shipping lanes unopposed. Border disputes erupted into small wars. Trade routes collapsed. The great galactic civilization that had exiled humanity was crumbling from within. Back in the void, Jiwoo delivered her report to Chancellor Donghyun Seo. He had been elected leader of what was now called the Terran Empire 3 years earlier. The name had been controversial. Some felt it was too aggressive, too imperial, but Donghyun argued that humanity needed to project strength. So they're weak, Donghyun said after hearing the report. Weaker than we thought. They're collapsing, sir, Jiwoo confirmed. The Council can barely maintain order. If we wanted to return, now would be the time. Donghyun sat back in his chair. He was a shrewd politician, but he had grown up in the void like most humans now. The galaxy was something from history books to him, not a place he felt connected to. The question is whether we should return at all, he said. We're thriving out here. We have everything we need. Why risk conflict with the Council? Yoonji Nam, who had been invited to the strategic meeting, spoke up. Because there are resources in the galaxy we could use. Because there are species being oppressed who might ally with us. And because if we don't secure our borders, eventually someone from the galaxy might find a way through the barrier to us. Donghyun nodded slowly. Prepare a proposal for the assembly. We'll build a fleet large enough to secure our return, not for conquest but for protection, and we'll reach out to the younger species in the galaxy, the ones who resent Council rule. The decision was made. The Terran Empire would return to the galaxy. The Void Forges went into overdrive production. New ships were built, larger and more powerful than anything humanity had made before. They combined 2 centuries of innovation with designs created specifically for warfare. Admiral Minho Yoon, now very old but still sharp, oversaw the military preparations. We're not going back as the frightened refugees who left, he told his officers. We're going back as an empire. They need to see our strength from the first moment. Meanwhile, Jiwoo led covert missions deeper into the galaxy. Her team made contact with several younger species who were unhappy with Council rule. She offered them nothing concrete yet, just the promise of future friendship and the hint that change was coming. One species, the Dracon, were particularly interested. They had been conquered by the Kolari 1,000 years ago and forced into servitude. When Jiwoo showed them recordings of human technology, their ambassador's eyes went wide. You could defeat the Kolari? The Draken asked. We could, Jiwoo said carefully. But we're not looking for war. We're looking for justice, for fairness, for a galaxy where species are free to develop on their own terms. The Council will never allow that. Jiwoo smiled. The Council won't have a choice. 6 months later, the first Imperial fleet was ready. 500 warships, each one a masterpiece of human engineering. They gathered at the edge of the void, preparing to cross back into the galaxy. Chancellor Donghyun recorded a message that would be broadcast to all human settlements. Our ancestors were banished from the galaxy for being too ambitious, too dangerous, too unpredictable. They were right about all of it. We are ambitious, we are dangerous, and we are very unpredictable. The Council thought the void would break us. Instead, it made us stronger than they can imagine. Now we return, not as supplicants seeking permission, but as sovereigns claiming our right to exist. The exile is over. The fleet crossed through the quantum barrier, entering galactic space for the first time in 2 centuries. The barriers that had held for so long might as well have been paper. The human ships passed through without slowing down. Warning alarms began sounding on council stations across the border regions. Sensors detected the massive human fleet. Emergency meetings were called. Messages were sent to Concordia Prime. But by the time the council reacted, humanity had already established a presence in 3 star systems. They moved with precision and speed that the galaxy hadn't seen in millennia. The exile was over. Humanity had returned, and nothing in the galaxy would ever be the same. Fleet Admiral Seojin Kang watched the tactical display as his ships moved into position. The mining colony on Viridian 3 was under attack by pirates, and the distress signal had reached human sensors an hour ago. This would be humanity's first official action in galactic space in 200 years. It needed to send the right message. All ships, weapons hot, but hold fire until my command, Seojin ordered. He was 40 years old, born in the void, and had spent his entire life training for combat. Now that training would be tested, the pirate fleet consisted of 20 ships surrounding the colony, firing on its shields. They were crude vessels cobbled together from stolen parts. The colony's defenses were failing. In minutes, the pirates would break through and begin looting. Jump in 3, 2, 1. The human fleet appeared from quantum space directly between the pirates and the colony. 12 warships materialized in perfect formation, their weapons already tracking targets. The pirates had no time to react. Fire, Seojin said calmly. The battle lasted 43 seconds. Human weapons developed in the darkness between galaxies cut through pirate shields like they weren't there. Precision strikes disabled engines and weapon systems without destroying the ships entirely. The pirates tried to scatter, but human ships were faster. Within a minute, every pirate vessel was drifting helplessly in space. The colony's communication channel opened. A voice spoke in the common galactic language, shaking with relief and confusion. Unknown vessels, this is Viridian Colony. We thank you for your assistance. May we know who you are? Seojin smiled. This was the moment. This is Fleet Admiral Seojin Kang of the Terran Empire. We received your distress call and responded. The pirates are neutralized and won't threaten you again. There was a long silence. Then did you say Terran? As in humans? But humans were banished centuries ago. We were. Now we're back. Before the colony could respond further, new contacts appeared on the tactical display. 5 Council peacekeeper ships jumped into the system. They were larger than the pirate vessels, but still small compared to human warships. They moved into an intercept course. Incoming transmission from the lead ship, reported the communications officer. Put it through, Seojin said. A Velthara commander appeared on the screen, its crystalline body glowing with agitation. This is Peacekeeper Commander Thaldrix. Unknown vessels. You have entered Council space without authorization. Identify yourselves immediately and prepare to be escorted out of this system. I already identified myself to the colony, Seojin replied. I am Fleet Admiral Seojin Kang of the Terran Empire. We responded to a distress call and stopped a pirate raid. You're welcome, by the way. The Velthara's glow shifted to an angry red. Humans, impossible. Your kind were banished and sealed beyond the barriers. How did you... It stopped, seeming to process the situation. No matter. The banishment still stands. You must leave Council space immediately. Diplomat Yuna Huang stepped forward on the bridge. She had been assigned to Seojun's flagship specifically for this moment. Commander Thaldrix, the Terran Empire has returned to the galaxy. We are claiming our right to exist in this space. We request formal negotiations with the Council to establish diplomatic relations and trade agreements. There will be no negotiations, Thaldrix said firmly. The Council's judgment was final. Leave now or face consequences. Seojin glanced at Yuna. She nodded slightly. They had prepared for this response. I'm afraid we decline your order, Seojin said. We're not the desperate refugees you expelled 2 centuries ago. We're a sovereign power and we're staying. Then you force our hand. Thaldrix cut the transmission. The peacekeeper ships activated their weapons and moved to attack formation. They were clearly expecting the human ships to retreat or surrender. They had no idea what they were facing. Admiral, they're powering weapons, the tactical officer reported. Let them fire first, Seojin said. Record everything. I want proof they initiated hostilities. The peacekeepers opened fire. Energy beams and missiles streaked toward the human fleet. Every shot was intercepted or deflected by human point defense systems. Not a single hit connected. Return fire. Disable only. I want prisoners to send back with our message. The human warships responded with surgical precision. Their weapons had been refined over 200 years of development. Where the peacekeepers used brute force, human ships used efficiency. Targeted strikes hit the peacekeepers' engines and weapon systems. Within 2 minutes, all 5 ships were drifting, powered down but intact. Launch boarding pods, Seojin ordered. Captain Kyungmin Baek led the Marine assault team. His soldiers wore armor that made them look like something from a nightmare, black and angular with glowing blue lights. They breached the peacekeeper flagship's hull and moved through the corridors with frightening speed. The Velthara crew tried to resist, but human Marines were faster and better trained. Stunning weapons dropped defenders without killing them. Within 10 minutes, Captain Kyungmin stood on the bridge of the peacekeeper flagship, with Commander Thaldrix kneeling before him. Disarmed and captured. Tell the council what you saw here today, Kyungmin said through his helmet speakers. Tell them humanity has returned. Tell them we're not asking for permission anymore. Back on Seojin's flagship, they released the peacekeeper crews into escape pods and sent them toward the nearest council station. The disabled ships were left drifting as evidence of what had happened. Send our message to the colony and broadcast it on all council frequencies, Seojin told his communications officer. Yuna Huang stood before the recorder, her expression calm and professional. This message is for the Galactic Council. The Terran Empire has returned to the galaxy. We seek peaceful coexistence and mutual trade. However, we will not be threatened or ordered about like children. We protected Viridian Colony from pirates because it was the right thing to do. We defended ourselves against council ships because we have the right to exist. We offer friendship to all species who want it, but we will not be exiled again. We are here to stay, and no one has the power to remove us. We await your response. The message spread across the galaxy faster than light. Every species heard it. Every government discussed it. The humans, those primitive upstarts who had been banished and forgotten, had returned with technology that made council forces look like toys. On Concordia Prime, emergency sessions were called. The elder races demanded immediate military action. The younger species asked questions. Some were afraid. Others were excited. A few were hopeful. The Drakon ambassador, who Jiwoo had contacted months earlier, smiled when he heard the news. Change was coming to the galaxy whether the council wanted it or not. Fleet Admiral Seojun received new orders from Chancellor Dongyun. The First Imperial Fleet was to establish a permanent presence in the border systems. More ships were being sent from the void. Diplomats were preparing to contact other species directly, bypassing the council entirely. What do you think they'll do? Asked Yuna, standing beside him as they watched the stars. They'll try to fight at first, Seojin said. They're old and proud. They can't imagine that we're actually stronger than them now. But after a few more encounters like this one, they'll realize the truth. The galaxy they controlled for thousands of years is over. Something new is beginning. And if they refuse to accept it, Seojin's expression hardened, then we'll make them accept it. We didn't survive 200 years in the void, just to be pushed around by species that grew soft and weak while we grew strong. One way or another, the galaxy will acknowledge us. News of the Viridian incident reached every corner of civilized space within days. The message was clear. Humanity was back, humanity was powerful, and humanity would not be dismissed again. The age of council dominance was ending. The age of human power was beginning. Ambassador He-Jin-Oh stepped off her shuttle onto the surface of Drakon Prime. The planet was beautiful, with purple skies and silver forests, but it carried the scars of 1,000 years of occupation. Kolari installations dotted the landscape, monitoring stations that watched the enslaved population constantly. The Drakon who greeted her was named Vex, a leader in their underground resistance. He was tall and reptilian, with scales that shimmered like oil on water. His people had been waiting 2 centuries for someone to challenge the council. Now that someone had arrived, Ambassador. Oh, your arrival gives us hope, Vex said, his voice a low rumble. The Kolari have ruled us for so long we had forgotten what freedom felt like. Freedom is coming, He-Jin promised. But we need to be smart about this. The Terran Empire wants allies, not subjects. We offer partnership, not another occupation. That alone makes you different from the council, Vex replied. He-Jin was one of 20 ambassadors sent across the galaxy to make contact with younger species. Her mission was to build a network of alliances that would isolate the Council politically. While she worked on diplomacy, others worked on different fronts. On a massive space station near human-controlled territory, Economic Minister Bora Shin was revolutionizing galactic trade. She sat in a conference room with representatives from 40 species, all eager to learn about human economic proposals. The Council controls trade through taxation and restrictions, Bora explained. They decide what you can sell, where you can sell it, and what price you can charge. The Terran Empire offers something different. We call it the Free Trade Concordat. No restrictions except basic safety standards. No taxation except what's needed for station maintenance. No council bureaucrats taking cuts of your profits. A merchant from the insectoid species called the Tixan clicked his mandibles excitedly. And what does the Terran Empire want in return? Access to your markets for human goods, Bora said. Fair competition. And friendship. That's all. The merchants looked at each other. The offer seemed too good to be true. But the samples of human technology Bora had brought spoke for themselves. Medicine that worked better than anything the Council provided. Power systems that were more efficient. Tools that lasted longer and cost less. Within a month, 30 species had signed trade agreements with the Terran Empire. Council markets began losing business rapidly. Species that had traded through Council stations for millennia suddenly found better deals elsewhere. On Concordia Prime, the Council watched their influence crumbling in real time. The Velthara, Kolari, and Namarans held emergency sessions every day, but they couldn't agree on what to do. Each elder race had its own priorities and biases. We must reinforce the quantum barriers, insisted High Crystallics of the Velthara. Strengthen them until nothing can pass through. Strategic Coordinator Sunwoo Lim had been expecting this response. She sat in a monitoring station in human space, watching Council transmissions with satisfaction. Her team had been analyzing Council behavior for months, predicting their responses and preparing counters. They're going to try to fix the barriers, she told her staff. Send Shadow Fleet to positions near all major barrier generators. The Council's attempt to strengthen the barriers never got off the ground. When their engineers arrived at the barrier generator stations, they found human ships already there, broadcasting a simple message. These facilities are being decommissioned. The barriers serve no purpose except to maintain an unjust exile. They will not be rebuilt. When Council forces tried to retake the generator stations by force, they discovered human defenses were impenetrable. The battles were short and decisive. The Council lost ships and personnel while achieving nothing. The Kolari, frustrated by their declining power, made a bold move. Their war fleet attacked a human outpost in the Outer Rim, hoping to prove that humanity could be hurt. They sent 300 ships, their largest battle group in centuries. Sunwoo had predicted this too. She had positioned Fleet Admiral Seojin's forces in perfect ambush positions. When the Kolari fleet arrived at the outpost expecting light defenses, they found themselves surrounded by twice their number of human warships. This is Fleet Admiral Seojin Kang to the Kolari fleet. Stand down or be destroyed. The Kolari commander, speaking with the thousand-voice harmony of the hive mind, responded with anger. You are invaders and criminals. The galaxy belongs to the Council. We will purge you from civilized space. Wrong answer, Seojin said quietly. All ships fire at will. The battle was spectacular and brief. Human weapons tore through Kolari shields. Their targeting systems were so accurate that they hit weak points the Kolari didn't even know existed. Within an hour, the entire Kolari fleet was disabled or destroyed. The survivors fled back to their home systems carrying news of total defeat. But Seojin didn't stop there. He followed the fleeing ships, and his fleet entered 3 systems where the Kolari had enslaved other species. On each world, human marines landed and disabled Kolari occupation forces. The enslaved populations were freed in a matter of days. Among those freed were the Draken, where Ambassador Heijin had been building relationships. When the Kolari occupation ended, Vex and his people celebrated in the streets. The Draken government immediately pledged alliance to the Terran Empire. You did more than free us, Vex told Heijin as they watched the last Kolari ships leave orbit. You gave us back our dignity. 2 more species freed from Kolari control also joined the alliance. The political map of the galaxy was being redrawn weekly. The Council's sphere of influence shrank while human influence expanded. The Namarans, the most philosophical of the elder races, sent a delegation to meet with Chancellor Donghyun. They were energy beings, formless and ancient, speaking through quantum transmissions directly into the human leader's mind. "You are fulfilling our ancient fears," the Namaran spoke. "You spread rapidly. You change everything you touch. You disrupt the order we maintained for eons." Donghyun sat calmly in his office, unafraid of the powerful beings before him. "Your order was built on oppression. You kept species as children, never allowing them to grow. You punished us for wanting to develop naturally. Your fears were about losing control, not about protecting the galaxy." "And what would you build in place of our order?" the Namaran asked. "Something better. A galaxy where species are free to rise or fall on their own merits. Where trade is fair and alliances are voluntary. Where no one is exiled for having potential." The Namarans were silent for a long moment. Then they spoke again. "Perhaps you are right. Perhaps our time is ending. But understand this, Chancellor Donghyun. If you become the oppressors you claim to oppose, the galaxy will rise against you as it should have risen against us." "Then we'll have deserved it," Donghyun replied. "But that's not our intention. Watch and see." The Free Trade Concordat expanded to include 60 species. Economic Minister Bora reported that human goods were now sold in every major market in the galaxy. The Council's economic power was broken. Ambassador Heijin and her fellow diplomats had built a network of 90 allied species. Most were young races that had been suppressed by the Council. They saw humanity as liberators and partners. Strategic Coordinator Sun Wu reported that Council military forces were in disarray. The Kalari had withdrawn to their home systems to lick their wounds. The Velthara's crystal ships were too old and fragile to risk in combat. The Namarans had no interest in war, preferring philosophical contemplation. The quantum barriers, those massive walls that had imprisoned humanity for 2 centuries, were now completely non-functional. Human engineers had systematically disabled every generator. The barriers existed only as fading energy signatures, ghosts of an old age. On Concordia Prime, the 3 elder races finally understood their situation. They had lost, not through a single dramatic defeat, but through 1,000 small losses across political, economic, and military fronts. The galaxy no longer followed their commands. The younger species looked to humanity for leadership. The only question remaining was what would happen next. Would the Council accept their diminished role, or would they make one final desperate stand? Chancellor Donghyun prepared his fleet for the answer. The time had come to visit Concordia Prime himself and settle matters once and for all. The largest fleet humanity had ever assembled hung in space around Concordia Prime. 2,000 warships, arranged in perfect formation, surrounded the ancient station that had been the center of galactic power for millennia. On the station, billions of beings from hundreds of species watched and waited to see what would happen next. Emperor Minseok Wu stood on the bridge of the Dreadnought Ascendant, looking at the station through the view screen. He had been elected chancellor 2 years ago, but recently the human government had reformed. The Terran Empire needed a single leader who could act decisively. Parliament had voted to give him the title of emperor. It was meant to be temporary, just for the crisis, but Minseok knew how these things worked. The title would probably stick. Supreme Commander Jamin Ko reports all forces in position, his aide informed him. The station is completely surrounded. No ship can leave without our permission. Minseok nodded slowly. This was the moment that would define the next 1,000 years of galactic history. 2 centuries ago, Ambassador Jiho Kim had stood in that station and begged for mercy. He had been rejected. Today, Chief Negotiator Hana Song would enter the same chambers, but she would not be begging. Send the message to the Council, Minseok ordered. We're ready to talk. On Concordia Prime, the 3 elder races gathered in the Council chamber. It was the same room where humanity had been banished, though most of the younger species representatives had left. Many species no longer recognized Council authority. Only the Velthara, Kalari, and Namarans remained, along with a handful of their most loyal subjects. High Crystallix's form pulsed with agitation. The Velthara leader had watched their civilization's power crumble over the past year. We should activate the station's defenses. We still have weapons that could destroy their fleet. And then what? Asked Prime Mind Kalari, speaking with 100 voices. Even if we destroyed this fleet, they would send another. And another. We saw what happened to our battle group. Human weapons are superior. Their ships are faster. Their soldiers are better trained. We cannot win a military conflict. The Namaran representative, a being of pure energy named Wisdom, floated in the center of the chamber. War is pointless. We must negotiate. Perhaps we can maintain some influence in the new order. There will be no new order, Crystallix insisted. We are the council. We have ruled for... The chamber doors opened. Chief Negotiator Hana Song walked in, flanked by 2 human marines in full armor. She was a small woman, middle-aged, with gray streaks in her hair. She wore a simple business suit, nothing ceremonial or military. But everyone in the room could feel the power she represented. Honored counselors, Hana said, her voice carrying clearly through the chamber. Thank you for agreeing to meet with me. We agreed to nothing, Crystallix said angrily. You invaded our station and demanded this meeting. Yes, Hana agreed calmly. Much like you demanded humanity leave the galaxy 200 years ago. The difference is we're willing to talk about terms. She walked to the center platform where Ji-Ho Kim had once stood and pleaded. She pulled out a data tablet and set it on the podium. Let's be clear about the situation, Hana continued. The Terran Empire controls half the galaxy through military presence or alliance. Our economy is larger than the Council's remaining territories. Our technology is superior. Your barriers are gone. Your authority is broken. You have 3 choices and only 3. You dare dictate to us. Kalari's 100 voices spoke in anger. I'm not dictating. I'm stating facts. Choice 1. You accept the end of the Council and join the new Congress of Species we're establishing. All species will have equal representation. All voices will be heard. No one will have veto power over others. Choice 2. You withdraw to your home systems and isolate yourselves. We will respect your borders and leave you alone. Choice 3. You refuse to accept reality and try to fight. In that case, we will remove you from power by force. The chamber erupted in protest. Crystallix's form turned bright red with rage. Kalari's voices buzzed with fury. Only Wisdom remained silent, contemplating what Hana had said. This is unacceptable, Crystallix shouted. We are the elder races. We guided this galaxy when your species was still primitive. You cannot simply erase thousands of years of history. Hana's expression didn't change. We're not erasing history. We're ending tyranny. You didn't guide the galaxy, you controlled it. You decided which species could advance and which couldn't. You punished innovation and rewarded obedience. You exiled us because you feared we would challenge your power. And you were right. Here we are. Supreme Commander Jemin Ko watched from orbit as the meeting progressed. He commanded the fleet from the battleship Retribution, ready to act if the Council tried anything. But his tactical analysis said they wouldn't. They were beaten and knew it. Sir, we're detecting energy spikes from the station's defense platforms, his weapons officer reported. Are they targeting us? No, sir. They're powering down. The Council is deactivating their weapons. Jamin smiled grimly. They were accepting reality. In the chamber, Wisdom the Namaran finally spoke. What you propose is the end of everything we built. But perhaps that is necessary. We maintained order through control. You offer chaos. We offer freedom, Hana corrected. Species will succeed or fail based on their own choices, not on whether they please the Council. Yes, there will be disorder at first, but that's better than the stagnation you created. And what guarantee do we have that the Terran Empire won't simply become the new Council? That you won't impose your will on the galaxy as we did? This was the critical question. Hana had known it would come. No guarantee except our word and our actions. The Congress of Species will have no permanent leaders. Every species gets 1 vote. The Terran Empire will have 1 vote, the same as everyone else. We'll serve as peacekeepers initially because we have the strongest military, but that role can be challenged if we abuse it. Pretty words, Crystallix said bitterly, but power corrupts. You will become what you claim to oppose. Maybe, Hana acknowledged, but at least we'll start from a place of equality. At least we'll try. That's more than the Council ever did. The 3 elder races conferred privately for an hour. When they returned, Wisdom spoke for all of them. The Namarans will join your Congress of Species. We see the wisdom in accepting change. Kalari's voices spoke next, laden with anger but also resignation. The Kalari will withdraw to our home systems. We want nothing to do with this new order. Leave us alone and we will leave you alone. Finally, Crystallix pulsed with dim colors the Velthara version of defeat. Our people are divided. Some will join the Congress. Others will withdraw with the Kalari. The Council is dissolved. You have won. Hana felt no triumph in that moment, only a sense of history turning. The council is dissolved, yes. But this isn't about winning or losing. It's about building something better. She activated her tablet and displayed the charter for the Congress of Species. Every intelligent species in the galaxy is invited to send representatives. The first assembly will be held here on Concordia Prime in 60 days. We will write new laws together, establish new trade agreements together, build a new civilization together. And if species refuse to participate, Crystallix asked, that's their right. We won't force anyone. But those who do participate will benefit from collective security, free trade, and shared technology. Those who isolate themselves will miss those benefits. The meeting ended. Hanasong left the chamber, walking out of the same doors that Jiho Kim had walked through 2 centuries ago. But where Jiho had left in defeat, Hana left having reshaped the galaxy. Emperor Minseok received her report and made a galaxy-wide broadcast. His face appeared on screens across thousands of worlds. This is Emperor Minseok Wu of the Terran Empire. The Galactic Council has been dissolved. In its place, we are creating the Congress of Species where all voices are equal. We were banished because the old powers feared our potential. We return because we realized it. The age of councils and masters is over. The age of equals begins now. Supreme Commander Jamin ordered the fleet to stand down but remain in position until the transition was complete. They would stay as peacekeepers, maintaining order while the new government formed. On dozens of worlds, species celebrated their new freedom. On others, there was fear and uncertainty about what would come next. And in the darkest corners of space, the Kolari and some Velthara retreated, nursing their resentment and plotting their isolation. But the galaxy had changed forever. The 200 years of exile had transformed humanity from hopeful newcomers into battle-hardened leaders. They had learned to survive in the void. They had learned to build from nothing. And they had learned that power without justice was just tyranny wearing a crown. The reckoning was complete. Now came the hard part. Building something worthy of the blood and tears spent to achieve it. 4 years had passed since the dissolution of the Galactic Council. First speaker Yejin Choi stood at the podium in the Great Assembly Hall on Concordia Prime, looking out at representatives from 200 species. Some sat in chairs, others floated in containment fields, and some existed as holographic projections from distant worlds. But they all had one thing in common. They were here as equals. The Congress of Species will now come to order, Yejin announced. Her voice was strong despite her age. She was the granddaughter of Prime Minister Daeho Choi, who had led humanity through the first days of exile. She had grown up hearing stories about the dark centuries. Now she led the government that had emerged from that darkness. The assembly quieted. On the agenda today were trade disputes, border negotiations, and a proposal for collective scientific research. Mundane business, but that was the point. The galaxy had moved from dramatic conflicts to ordinary governance. That was progress. Yejin watched as representatives debated and voted. The Terran Empire had officially reformed into the Terran Commonwealth 4 years ago, acknowledging that empires were what they had fought against. They still maintained the largest military force, but they shared peacekeeping duties with allied species now. The Draken provided ground forces. The Tixan contributed patrol ships. The galaxy defended itself collectively rather than relying on a single power. After the session ended, Yejin walked through the station's corridors. Concordia Prime had been renovated extensively. Where the old council chambers had been exclusive and intimidating, the new Congress halls were open and welcoming. Gardens grew under artificial suns. Markets bustled with goods from hundreds of worlds. Children from a dozen species played together in parks. She stopped at one such park and watched the children. A human girl taught an alien friend how to play void ball, a game invented during the exile. The rules were simple, but it required cooperation and trust. The alien child struggled at first, but was laughing as they figured it out together. Across the galaxy, similar scenes played out. On former council worlds, Colonial Administrator Junho Park helped local governments establish their independence. His job was strange for someone from an empire. He worked himself out of a job. Every world he helped eventually didn't need him anymore. And that was exactly the goal. Junho sat in an office on Helios Trade Station, meeting with local leaders who wanted to establish their own space program. The station had been under council control for thousands of years. Now it was independent and thriving. We want to explore the regions beyond our star cluster, the station administrator told him. But we need better ships. The council never let us develop our own spacecraft technology. Then we'll share ours, Junho said simply. He pulled up technical specifications on his tablet. Here are the designs for basic exploration vessels. We'll send engineers to help you build them and train your crews. In 2 years, you'll be exploring on your own. And what does the Commonwealth want in return? Junho smiled. Nothing except your friendship. Maybe someday you'll help another species the way we're helping you. That's how the new galaxy works. The administrator looked skeptical but grateful. These conversations happened on hundreds of worlds. The Commonwealth shared technology freely, trained other species, and asked for nothing but peaceful coexistence. Some accused them of naivety. Others said it was a clever strategy to build loyalty. Junho didn't care about the politics. He just wanted to help. In a university on Earth, historian Soyeon Moon put the finishing touches on her book. From Exile to Empire had taken her 10 years to write. She had interviewed survivors from the Dark Centuries, analyzed military records, and traced the political evolution that led to the Congress of Species. Her final chapter addressed the question everyone asked. Should the galaxy have feared humanity? They feared us not for what we were, she wrote, but for what we represented. The idea that any species given will and time can rise above their assigned place. The Council maintained order by keeping species in their designated roles. Humanity refused to accept our role as subordinates. We demanded equality when we were weak. When denied, we left. When we returned, we were strong enough to enforce our demand. The Council was right to fear that pattern. It ended their reign. It liberated the galaxy. Soyeon paused in her writing to look at old photographs. Images of the first void forges being built. Dr. Salmon Lee working in her laboratory. Admiral Min Ho-yoon, commanding the defense of the scattered colonies. These people had suffered in darkness so that future generations could live in light. Her book would be published next month and distributed to every species in the Congress. Let the galaxy know what humanity had endured. Let them understand that freedom had a price, paid in full by those who came before. In the void between galaxies where humanity had spent 2 centuries in exile, a massive monument now stood. The memorial to the Dark Centuries was a structure of crystal and metal floating in the darkness. Inside were the names of every human who had died during the exile. 3 million names. 3 million people who never saw humanity's triumph but made it possible. The monument was also a nature preserve. The old void forges were left standing as historical artifacts. The first settlements were maintained as museums. And the quantum barriers, though non-functional, were left in place as a reminder of what had been overcome. Tourist ships brought visitors from across the galaxy to see where humanity had survived the impossible. Young people from species that had joined the Congress came to understand what sacrifice looked like. The void that had been humanity's prison was now a classroom teaching the value of perseverance. Back on Unity Station, as Concordia Prime was now called, Yejin attended a ceremony honoring the founders. Statues were being unveiled to commemorate those who had led humanity through the Dark Centuries and back to the galaxy. She stood before a statue of her grandfather, Prime Minister Dae-ho Choi, and read the inscription beneath it. We will survive this. We will thrive in the darkness, and one day we will return. He had kept that promise, though he died decades before seeing it fulfilled. They all did. Every generation during the exile had worked toward a future they might never see. That was the real strength humanity had demonstrated. Not their weapons or technology, but their willingness to sacrifice for something larger than themselves. An old Velthara approached Yejin as she stood before the statue. Its crystalline body was cracked with age, colors dim and fading. She recognized it from historical records. This was one of the counselors who had voted for humanity's exile. First speaker, the Velthara said quietly. I wanted to apologize before I die. I voted to banish your people. I believed we were protecting the galaxy. I was wrong. Yejin studied the ancient being. She could feel anger, remembering all the suffering that vote had caused. But what purpose would anger serve now? We all make mistakes, she said finally. What matters is whether we learn from them. The galaxy is learning. Maybe that's all we can ask. The Velthara's colors shifted to something like relief. Your people could have destroyed us when you returned. You had the power, but you showed mercy. That is how I know you are better than we were. We're not better. We just had the advantage of learning from your mistakes. Besides, destruction would have made us the same as the Council. We fought for something better, not just for revenge. The ceremony continued. Statues were unveiled for Ambassador Ji-ho Kim, Dr. Somin Lee, Admiral Min-ho Yoon, and dozens of other heroes of the exile. Each one represented a piece of humanity's journey from desperate refugees to galactic leaders. As the ceremony ended and representatives mingled, Yejin heard a commotion in the park below. She looked down to see children from different species arguing about the rules of Void Ball. A human child was trying to explain the game to a Namaran youth, who existed partially as energy and partially as matter. You can't just phase through the ball. The human child protested, "Why not? My nature allows it because it's against the rules. Everyone has to play by the same rules or the game doesn't work." The Namaran child considered this, then solidified more fully. "Okay, I understand. Same rules for everyone. That makes the game fair," Yejin smiled. These children had never known the Council's hierarchy or humanity's exile. To them, equality was just how things worked. They would inherit a galaxy where species rose and fell by their own efforts, where cooperation was rewarded, and where no one was punished for having potential that evening. Yejin stood at a window looking out at the stars. The galaxy stretched before her, full of possibility and challenge. The Congress of Species was still young, still figuring out how to govern effectively. There would be conflicts, mistakes, and setbacks, but there would also be growth, discovery, and hope. She thought about her grandfather and all those who had suffered in the void. They had been banished by the galaxy for being too ambitious, too unpredictable, too dangerous. The Council had been right about all of it. Humanity was ambitious. They were unpredictable. And they were dangerous to any system built on oppression. But what the Council had failed to understand was that those qualities could build as well as destroy. Ambition drove exploration and innovation. Unpredictability allowed adaptation and creativity. And the willingness to be dangerous protected those too weak to defend themselves.